Hi, I'm Joe Gibson, and welcome back to Plan9Crunch. Here we're all about cult films, and today we'll be reading a page of the best genre literature. In this case, we'll be reading Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's prototypical science fiction novel, and one that's inspired a great many adaptations, including the classic Universal films with Boris Karloff and eventually Glenn Strange, as well as even a Japanese film where Frankenstein's monster is irradiated and fights the lizard Baragon as well as the giant octopus. A whole expansive franchise. In any case, the selection that I've chosen to read from is on around page 100 of this edition, the Barnes & Noble copy. The monster is talking to Frankenstein about what he's been up to since they've last met. This reading had puzzled me extremely at first, but by degrees I discovered that he uttered many of the same sounds when he read as when he talked. I conjectured, therefore, that he found on the paper signs for speech which he understood, and I ardently longed to comprehend these also. But how was that possible? I did not even understand the sounds for which they stood as signs. I improved, however, sensibly in the science, but not sufficiently to follow up any kind of conversation, although I applied my whole mind to the endeavor, for I easily perceived that, although I eagerly longed to discover myself to the cottagers, I ought not to make the attempt until I had first become master of their language, which knowledge might enable me to make them overlook the deformity of my figure. For with this also the contrast perpetually presented to my eyes had me acquainted. I had admired the perfect forms of my cottagers, their grace, beauty, and delicate complexions. But how was I terrified when I viewed myself in a transparent pool? At first I started back, unable to believe that it was indeed I who was reflected in the mirror, and when I became fully convinced that I was in reality the monster that I am, I was filled with the bitterest sensations of despondence and mortification. Alas, I did not yet entirely know the fatal effects of this miserable deformity. Now, obviously, based on that, there are several differences that appear in the novel to the films that are based on it. The creature is very eloquent in the novel and intelligent, whereas Boris Karloff and Glenn Strange have the reputation of being more brainless, thoughtless things. Now, granted, the first two Frankenstein films by Boris Karloff do encompass a part of this, but then he's regressed to not speaking in Son of Frankenstein. And it's very interesting to have both perspectives, as this is very much a nature versus nurture a debate. And the idea that you can swap out his brain, and he's roughly the same thing, speaks almost more to nature than the nurture that we see in this and the first two films of Universal's. In any case, thank you for reading with us, and this has been Plan9Crunch. We are on YouTube, as well as now TikTok, as well as we have podcasts on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and that's a wrap.